Well, hello everybody, Kim Conchie from Cornwall Chamber of Commerce. Delighted to be back in the Cornwall Channel TV studios at Helland. Beautiful day, as it always seems to be when I come to Bodmin Moor. And today I've got with me Cornwall marketing royalty, really. I've got Belinda Shipp, who is the founder and owner of Cornish Marketing Consultancy. But before that, a lot of people in Cornwall, certainly, and well beyond, will know you from how many years at Rodders, was it, Belinda?
Almost 10, so almost a decade.
Almost a decade.
Yeah.
And did time fly and enjoying yourself? I mean, it was you were associated with Rodders at a time when it was really expanding and doing great things. And I know people listening to this podcast will, from way beyond Cornwall will know Rodders as well as a much loved Cornish brand. So
yeah, I remember the rebrand as well that we did.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. That was quite radical at the time, wasn't it? And it felt very different for a sort of dairy brand. It really shook things up. But it was great, and really now has established itself as well the forerunner of that type of sort of luxury good, hasn't it?
Yeah, no, it was 11 years ago now, so. Time has moved on, but it felt like quite a big, bold move at the time.
It did.
A few sleepless nights over it, but it worked really well. And it really did propel us sort of outside of being that sort of local brand to being sort of a much more nationally recognised, internationally recognised brand. So.
Yeah, yes, because exporting, of course, is an important part of Rodders now as well, isn't it? So,
absolutely.
No, fantastic. Well, I'm sure it was a very happy 10 years, very sort of progressive, that's for sure. So now the Cornish Marketing Consultancy, and when you and I spoke a few weeks ago, I was really taken with my background in sort of marketing communications as to what you've grasped as a real need here. And I think the point that struck me was that marketers always talk about connecting with the soul, the psyche of their target market, but often leave it hanging there. And we as marketing are meant to go, oh my word, well, am I meant to know how to do that? Am I going to look a fool if I ask? And that sort of thing. And I think what you have done now is really take that next step to make it really an available project for people to weave into their marketing campaigns. So just tell me a bit about it.
Yeah, and it is exactly that. Certainly at Rodders, obviously, we know Rodders as a family business, so if you're spending money on marketing, it's equivalent to taking money out of Nick Rodder's pocket and saying, can I invest it on this? And I'd have so many agencies pitch these sort of ideas to me, and I'd always say, well, how do I know this is going to work? And often I didn't get an answer that I was happy with. Well, that feels like gambling with money. That doesn't feel like marketing. So going out on my own, I knew that I couldn't offer that service. I had to offer a better service. I had to be able to say to my clients, this is going to work and this is why, because actually most business owners want to know why it's going to work, not just sort of blind faith. We need to know why it's going to work. And it really came down to the fact that all marketing works when we create those emotional human connections, because that really doesn't matter. You're B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter. There's always going to be at least one human being.
Of course.
At the end of that communication. That human being always is going to have a brain. And so great things really start to happen when we start to understand human psychology and how the brain works, because that's how we can persuade the brain in a really gentle way. This is not about being sleazy or pushy. This is about building relationships gently with clients. And I think that actually marketing itself is almost at fault for this sort of mentality of this pushiness. So if you think about the language you use around marketing, so targeting, well, that's something you put on an enemy's back. It's not something you really want to do to your customers. And then we talk about converting, but as a customer myself, and as a customer yourself, being converted, that feels really
intrusive, doesn't it?
Yes. Pushy, uncomfortable.
Yes.
We don't want to be converted. I want to be communicated with, and I want to be nurtured, and build a relationship. Absolutely, but convert me. That's
Okay. So, do you think the great brands that we feel, as you say, that we haven't been converted to, but have actually chimed with us, resonated with us, have they got what you're?
Yeah, they create these human connections. So the way I sort of built the model, which is the human marketing system, which I'm releasing out now, is to say, well, okay, how do we start building those relationships? And building relationships is about building rapport, really. How do we build rapport? And if we know that 80% of any buying decision is emotional, our our feelings rule our thoughts and our hearts rule our heads. And that emotion's really important, because people who are emotionally connected to your brand, they're going to buy more, they're going to pay more, they're going to talk about you more. These are really important guys. So we need to create that emotional connection. It's been proven that emotional connection is more important to your profit line than even customer satisfaction.
Okay.
So we need that emotional connection. So then you say, well, okay, if I need it, how do I do it? And that's the bit that we were talking about on our call. And what most brands start by doing is they start by, if you land on, let's say, if I take a website, we land on a website, and those websites are saying, these are the products and services that I sell. I'm great. But if you and I go to a party and we meet somebody who's talking about themselves and saying how wonderful they are, actually we're going to get bored really quick. There's no emotional connection going on here. And with brands, it's the same. So people who talk about themselves, they're boring. Brands that talk about themselves, they're boring too. They don't create these human connections. So if we know what we don't want to do, then you say, well, what do we need to do? Actually, customers, they need to feel belonged. They need to be nurtured. They need to feel understood. So if we can understand, that's an intense human need, isn't it?
It is, good word, yes.
You talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all those sorts of things. But we all need to be understood. We all need to be nurtured. We want to land on a website and go, or any marketing material and go, oh, these people get me. That's what we need.
Yeah.
That's emotional connection right there when we hear that. So to do that, we need to be talking about our customers' problems and sort of leaning into those problems, because anybody who turns up on a website. So if we've got the Cornwall Chamber logo here, but if this was your website, I land on your website because I've got a problem that I'm looking to solve. And I've been to the Cornwall Chamber website or any other website. We've got a problem. Well, you need to tell me that you understand my problems. Like, gosh, thank goodness that I'm now in the right place. And that needs to be the focus of the communications that we have. So we need to understand the customer's problems, but then also we know that actually, if I'm honest, it's not the problem that people are looking to solve, it's the way that problem makes them feel. So we need to understand their feelings. And then when we take it to the feelings, we start to get this deeper level where people go, yeah, they understand me, I'm in the right place. So that's how we start to create these feelings. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense, and I'm listening to every word with real intrigue, and I'm thinking about the relationships you're making it as a human psychological one. Some people have chemistry with more people than others, so you want to make a brand, presumably, for it to be not limited to a too small a niche of people. You want to make that chemistry of the brand as it comes across and asks you about what are your connection points. It's very much asking you, and that's, as you say, going back to the connection of somebody you meet at a party. If they're starting to ask you about you, you're feeling already warm, aren't you? And friendly with them.
And if you feel understood, then great. And I think that word you just used there, niche, it's also misunderstood really, and in a way, because people think, oh, what's your niche? They think, well, what's your sector? And they start describing, I don't know, 25-year-old women that do this, that, and the other. But actually, that's not really your niche. The niche is the people who have that problem that you solve. Yeah. So when we start talking about that, then we can really lean into that problem when we land on the websites. Okay. Because 100% there's always a problem at the foot of why we land on sites. So that takes us so far. We say, well, as 80% of decision making is emotional, but actually but feelings alone don't make purchases. So we need to start thinking about the head, and the head's responsible for two things. It's responsible for logic, but it's also responsible for the imagination. And as marketeers or business owners, we need to spark the imagination and help people envision what success looks like when they work with us. Because if they can't see the benefit of buying from us, then guess what? They ain't going to buy.
No. And that, as you say, that's the same whether it's B2B, B2C, product matter. Or service, isn't it? That connectivity is the same.
Or charities, exactly. Yeah. Actually, how am I going to feel when I've donated to you? Or all those sorts of things. So this really does work across the board. But as brands, we think it's obvious what that's going to look like. But unless we tell people, then they're not going to know. So we've got to help people envision what success looks like. But then we've also got to help people envision the other side of that coin, and that's what happens if they don't buy from us. Because from a chamber point of view, for example, I'll use chamber as an example, but from a chamber point of view, if I don't come to the chamber, I'm not going to be as well networked, I'm not going to have the industry insights, and I'm going to miss out on business, for example. So we've got to help people envision that, because there's only two reasons to buy anything, and that's to move forward towards something good or to move away from something that we're trying to escape from. But they're both part of that buying decision. So we've got to talk about both, or we're missing half of that conversation. But again, as brands, we think it's really obvious. But if we don't state it, then we're making it really difficult for our customers to understand. And a fact that I love and I talk about all the time is that the brain is just 2% of our body weight, but it consumes 25% of our energy. Which is
what a great stat.
It's a great stat, and I really love it, because you think, I drove up to Oxford last week and I was really tired when I got there. Well, that's because I just sat in the car, but because my brain's really thinking, there's a lot of traffic and I'm thinking, so I get there and I'm tired. Well, our brains don't like to be tired, and humans aren't computers, so computers like making these complex decisions, but guess what? People just don't. They want to make it as simple as possible because they need to conserve those calories. Because if you take us back sort of, into evolution times kind of thing, if we're caveman, we need to hold those calories in case a saber-toothed tiger comes running around to come to us. Yeah. We don't want to use our brains to think about this stuff.
Okay.
So as brands, we've got to do the thinking for our clients.
So when you're with a new client, you're trying to make the message and the values and the images of that product or service that you're being asked to promote applicable to, if it's not a 25-year-old woman, blah, 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 that it's people with a particular problem or connectivity.
Because that's why any business exists.
Okay. And do you as a marketer immediately turn to words, tone, images? Is it a combination of all of those things? Are you thinking about the channels by which it's going to be communicated at that stage, or is it far more, fundamental at that stage?
I think the foundation is always that message. So we need to get the message right. And if we start getting the message right, then we can start thinking about the channels that we need to be on. But it's no good trying to think about that first. We've got to think, okay, how do we appeal to the heart? How do we appeal to the head? How do we appeal to rationality? How do we get people to move forward with their feet? How do we get them to take action? And only really then do we start to say, okay, now what channels do I need to be on? Because I could talk a whole load of guff that's not going to land and compel and connect with our clients and customers. So you can spend a heck of a lot of time and money on marketing that just doesn't work. And it's not because you're on the wrong channels, it's because your messaging just doesn't connect with those hearts and minds. If your message doesn't connect with hearts and minds, people don't know why you matter, people don't buy, you miss opportunities to sell. It's a lot easier if you get that message right to start with. And I think that's where a lot of businesses go wrong. They say, we need to do marketing. Oh, we better be on Facebook, or we better do whatever. And they go off running to be on channels and make noise, really, because if your message isn't being heard properly, that's all you're doing, is just making noise. We don't want to make noise, we want to make connections, and they're not the same thing.
Absolutely. Connections is a great word, isn't it? I mean, I use it for, people talk about networking, and I'm very conscious that networking with a purpose is making connections, just as a good marketing campaign, just as any human interaction does, in the way that you're talking about. So yeah, it's just not making noise. That's not going to turn anybody on, is it? Really? No.
And in many ways, it turns us off, because I think of like attention as almost being, like a currency. I don't want to grab your attention, because if I grab your attention and I don't give you anything of value back, next time I come along and try to grab your attention, you're going to be like, well, no, I've heard that before, no thank you. But if I can earn your attention by giving you marketing of value, by helping you solve your problems, by connecting to you the things that you need, you're going to listen to me more next time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how we start to nurture those relationships, is by thinking about marketing more as sort of if you like, an act of generosity. it's connecting people who have whatever problem it is that they have to the solution. And if we, as businesses and as brands, if we know that our product or service helps people, then it's okay to connect them.
And then the channels almost figure from that vision, that sort of thing that you've set out, then the correct channels and the methods of communication presumably sort of almost fall out of that sort of thinking then, really.
Yeah.
And I guess going back to your point about the return on investment for a business owner, if you're not having to make noise, if you've identified exactly what the connection, to use your word, is, then presumably the spend could be far less on the channels.
Hugely less.
Because you're getting that right friendship, the right eye contact, should we call it? Yes.
So if you create human connection, then you're going to have a more loyal following. They're going to, if you speak clearly, clarity, and sort of in a compelling way, they're going to talk about you more often. So you're going to get more word of mouth, which is, I won't say it's free media, but it's as close as we're going to get. So, word will spread if we can create those connections. So we're going to get that. We're going to get less wastage because it's, I suppose, traditionally it's been quite hard to create emotional connection. People haven't known what they need to do. So what they then end up doing is blasting out messages and just creating this noise or driving traffic to websites that don't work. If we stop doing all that and just stand back and go, right, how am I going to connect with my customers' hearts and minds, because and help them to take action, because that's the next stage. It's no good just connecting with hearts and minds. You do have to get them to create action as well. So we need to do that. But if I can do that clearly, then guess what? My ad spend or my return on investment goes up. My ad spend doesn't necessarily come down. It could do, but your return is going to become that much greater. And then you're going to see this sort of viralness. You're going to have people talking about you, and that's and coming back more often because they get it and they feel connected.
Okay, so from a marketing point of view, when you're thinking through this with a client, is there a playbook of things you're going through in your mind of what the words are, what the look is, what the tone is? Are you listening very much to what they're saying, and how much do you find business owners misunderstand or think differently about their products and services that you have to correct to, or are you listening to them and going, okay, I get what you're doing, but you're not getting this positioned?
Probably a bit of both, to be fair. I think because the standard answer is still to say, I need to market, so I need to talk about my products and services, and people land on my website because that's what they want to hear about, isn't it? And I say, well, no, actually, the nicest possible sense, no, it's not. They want to hear about themselves, because as a customer or as human beings, we wake up in the morning. I woke up in the morning this morning and I think, what am I going to have for breakfast? I'm going to go to this podcast. I've got to do this beforehand. I need to do that. And it's about, and I don't like to think of myself as a particularly selfish person, but it's about me. It's, that's survival. My brain is trying to survive. It's trying to do all the right things. So if I suddenly hear somebody in a brand just talking about them, I'm like, well, how does that relate to me? It doesn't relate to me being able to do, get on with my life. But if a brand says I can relate, show me how they're going to help me survive and thrive, which is what my brain's trying to do. And that's not an arrogant thing. That's just the way our human brains absolutely work. Yeah. So if a brand can show me how I can survive and thrive, then I'm going to be much more emotionally connected to join them. And I think that's the flip that businesses don't always get and understand. So when I'm going back to the question a little bit, when I'm talking to brands for the first time, it's a lot about, well, what does your customer think? What do they feel? What keeps them up at night? How do you solve that problem? Why do you solve it differently? Why is that better for your client, not necessarily for you as a business? Because if we put the customer at the heart of our communication, so we put people first and the profits will follow, rather than trying to look at it the other way around.
I absolutely get that. And so are you very keen on blatantly asking customers, surveys and so on and so forth, what they think, to get them to be the positive interactor, the pull rather than the push element? Is that that's a good tactic?
That's a great tactic. Often business owners do know this stuff. when I'm sort of speaking to clients, they don't know they know it until we ask the right questions.
Yeah.
So when we start to ask the right questions, it all starts to come out. And I would urge any business not to stop getting started on this because they think they haven't got the information. Start on it because you have got the information, and anything you put together is better than probably your competitors who aren't thinking this way. So don't let it hold you back. We should be moving towards this sort of conversation.
Okay.
I very rarely speak to a business owner and they're totally off the mark. Most of them are. People are talking to business customers anyway, so you're getting this information. Do I need to back that up with research and things? Often, yes, but often there's a mine of information within a company. Some reviews or customer service departments who are talking to people all the time, and this information then comes out, and then we can use that. And there's all sorts of other sort of data mining that we can do for free on the internet as well.
Okay.
That can really help that sort of thing.
So that grasping that information they've either got or that they need to get is very much part of your service. That's part of what Cornish Marketing Consultancy does for a client, is it? Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we need to understand that foundation, the person with the problem with the pain, before we can build up actually what were traditionally known as the P's. Yeah. I don't know what it is about P's and marketing, but so the person, I talk about the person with the problem and the pain, and then obviously we talk about product, place, promotion, all those sorts of things. But if we don't put the person front and centre, then it's really easy to miss the mark. People say, well, this is what I want to sell, but it's not about what you want to sell, it's what your customers want to buy and how do they want to buy it.
And I think the rest of the world is catching up with this a bit late. I mean, if you look at what the B Corps are measured on, it's very much people, place, planet, people first. And
100%.
And I still think that some businesses are too certain of their own place in the world and not attentive enough to what their customers are going to tell them. So people, I think, is a fantastic word. If everything started with that, I think sense of pride in your place, your care of the planet, your profits, and everything will follow from that. From that, won't it? Yeah.
But so often businesses just flip it and start it the other way around. They think business is about making money. It is about making money, but you can only do it if you serve your customers well with a great product and service. But then, no matter how good your product or service is, if your message is unclear, then people aren't going to know you've got a great product or service. So actually, the foundation of everything, if you think of it that way, starts to be, well, how clear can we make our message? Because then people understand how good our product is and why the products matter to their lives, so that they can then go on and buy.
No, absolutely. I've for many years said that profit is the outcome of a well-run business, not the purpose of it.
Perfect.
And that's very much people first, I think, really. So great. So Cornish Marketing Consultancy, proud to be based here in Cornwall, but presumably serve the globe if they're suitable, if they're suitable and meet your values and so on. I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I have clients in Cornwall, but I also have clients in Lancashire, Helsinki, Kenya, Canada.
Okay, so you're already doing the world, reaching out. Yes,
I am doing some of the world.
Yeah. Well, sort of random corners on the side.
Very randomly.
But they're all getting the Cornish brand, so that's great. Yes. And have they ever been to visit you here in this wonderful part of the world or not?
No. I guess that's the pleasure of Zoom, though, isn't it? The fact that if you're happy to work in other people's time zones, actually it doesn't matter. Yeah. In fact, I had a client say to me, she said, I'm really curious, Belinda, why are you the Cornish Marketing Consultancy? And I went to open my mouth to say, it's because I live in Cornwall. And she went, is it to do with the Cornish hen? I was like...
Oh, that's a funny one. Yes, okay.
But I guess it just proves it doesn't matter where you are in the world anymore. We can do business across the world.
And the connectivity that you're talking about, the human connectivity, of course, that is not limited by boundaries or whatever, is it? No, absolutely not. No, okay. Well, look, that's been absolutely fabulous. So for people to get in touch with you, Cornish Marketing Consultancy,
Yep, cornishmarketing.co.uk.
Right, cornishmarketing.co.uk.
Yeah, or hit me up on LinkedIn. So
Belinda
Belinda
Shipp.
Shipp at
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'll always take connections from
Yeah,
people that are.
fantastic, fantastic. Well, I think that's been absolutely insightful. I know my brain's going to be whirring for the rest of the day now, thinking about ways in which, well, not only the Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, but other businesses I've got interest in. How are we going to up our game to be more attentive to that psychology message, which I think I've got from you over the last 20 minutes. That's the important thing, isn't it? Not thinking, oh, we've got to make this noise, we've got to say this, we've got to
Yeah.
promote that or whatever. Actually, what are the people that we're talking to or wanting to talk to thinking when we're actually
And I think
getting our messages to
that
them?
is, I mean, if there's a takeaway from this, it's what do you want to make customers to think? What do you want them to feel? And what do you want them to do? And sometimes we forget that when we're outputting our marketing, but they're the three things. They've got to think something, they've got to feel something, and they've got to do something. And this isn't about paying lip service. This is actually thinking really what the customer really does.
Well, I think those stats you said about the better relationship, they're going to buy more, they're going to buy, you're going to retain customers much more into the future if you've got their hearts and minds, can't you?
Yeah.
And we sort of know this. The ones that perhaps by accident, the brands that have connected with our psyche are the ones that we would be net promoters of and go out and sing about, wouldn't we? Yeah. So it's, if a few more can get that right with their ideal customers, and obviously those ideal customers are the ones who are connecting with them psychologically. I mean, it's lovely. Well, I know that I would really enjoy as a business owner that sort of communication with my marketing agency. So all the very best to you indeed. That's very exciting.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Pleasure.